So welcome everyone to this, our first talk series of Support Local Art. Support Local Art is a platform we have established, a holistic platform aimed at engaging those involved and interested in the Sri Lankan arts community in a discourse focused on the challenges and the opportunities we are facing. This is the first talk in the series, and it's titled The Patron. And I'm honored to have with me today 4 very prominent patrons from our Sri Lankan industry. This conversation will highlight different forms of patronage, discuss the journey of becoming a patron in different industries and forms, but also hopefully engage us in a discussion which speaks a little bit more about the current projects as well as the challenges that we're looking at in the industry and how we can approach these conversations and engage into a deeper and more constructive dialogue looking at this as a community. We will be recording this conversation, and at the end of the series of questions we will be discussing with the panelists, we will be opening for some Q&A. So please don't hesitate to share your questions with us in the Q&A little box that is there on Zoom, and we will select as many questions as we can at the end, depending on how time works in our favor. I am honored to have with me today Ajit Gunawardena, who is a collector and the former deputy chairman of John Keel's Holdings and a founding committee member of the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art in Sri Lanka. We also have Nadija Thambaya, who is the head of the John Keel's Foundation, as well as a member of the George Keel Trust, Jeffrey Baba Trust, the George Keel Foundation, the Jeffrey Baba Trust, the Lunuganga Trust, and a member of the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art in Sri Lanka. We have with us Udeshant Fernando, chairman of Paradise Road Group of Companies and the Udeshant Fernando Foundation, and Anuji Amarasinghe, a patron and social entrepreneur. I would like to begin this conversation with you, Ajit. Your work as an integral part of the John Keel's acquisitions of contemporary art and the journey that you've taken from becoming a collector to a corporate patron to more recently an institutional patron is an incredibly interesting one. Can you tell us a little bit about how this happened and your experience from a little bit from the beginning?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief. So I was actually introduced to Sri Lankan contemporary art about 30 odd years ago by Mr. Shant Fernando himself, who is as part of this panel. And when I say introduced, I would say introduced and educated to understand the contemporary art culture, the scene, the artists, and so on. And that sort of triggered a sort of excitement in me outside my old boring corporate world. This gave another aspect that created a lot of interest as far as I was concerned. That evolved from personal personal sort of getting a personal collection going over a period of time to being part of the John Keel's art initiative, and that also was started about 25 years ago or 30 years ago with the being involved in the George Keel Foundation, being involved in various sort of initiatives like the Kalapola and all of that. However, what during that period, when we decided to do an entire rebranding exercise of our hotel properties, what we did was we introduced art as an integral part of the branding. And if you go to some of our, quite actually most of the properties, the cinnamon properties, you will see that there is it's not sort of an in-your-face type of art, but there will be a centerpiece, as it were, in most of these properties, and there was a theme that we built around it, and that became the next phase where John Keels became a lot more involved in the institution, and Nadija, I'm sure, will brief you more about that. Now, as towards the end of my career at Keels, I was then approached by a group of art professionals, most of whom actually I didn't know, but they came together and they then decided to come and talk to me. And these are Sri Lankans, all working overseas in various museums and in various areas in the art world. And they sort of they educated me into the importance of having a contemporary art museum in Sri Lanka, how that would be the next phase of what could be done, and wanted me to sort of play the role of to chair it. So that's how we moved into that, and that's a relatively new initiative. It's only a couple of years old, but it's going to be something that we would like to take over the longer term, that we can talk about that probably a little later. But there is going to be a lot of patronage required to really get a proper museum going, and that's the challenge that we've got to sort of deal with as we go forward. But the importance of having a museum in Sri Lanka to take on what has already been done so well by most of you, to the next that is just the final sort of step, we think is important, especially with tourism being such a big part of the Sri Lankan economy. It is a missing link that we believe will sort of support economic activities, support the art world, and support the art economy in its as a whole.
I think it's an incredibly important gap which you have filled with this project. And yes, as I mentioned at the beginning, the aim of this conversation is really to focus on identifying what patronage is also to our arts community and those involved, for projects such as this, and for a time like this when we strongly believe that everybody's involvement is incredibly important. So interested to hear more about that in our second section. And moving on to Nadija now. You call yourself an accidental patron, Nadija, but I think your long list of titles involved with the arts community are testament to your dedication, to your work with the foundation, with the many different organizations that you are involved with. Can you take us through how this involvement began and where you are now, and walk us through a little bit of how you work as a patron, mainly via the corporate sector?
Thank you, Saskia. I am an accidental patron. I've always enjoyed art. In the John Keels Foundation was what allowed me to develop a more conscious appreciation as to why a Sri Lankan corporate, a leading Sri Lankan corporate, should support the arts and what was required. Credit must be given to Ajit. You know, we had a very visionary leadership, and they encouraged the foundation to research and develop a long roadmap. What was it that was required to preserve our modern art heritage and take it to the world stage? And I have to tell you, it's been an incredibly educational journey for me, and certainly for the team at the foundation. And I have found myself completely encompassed in this world, which fascinates me. For the foundation, Kalapala was the start. We've been involved in it for 30 years. And what our research, when we researched this roadmap, was what our research showed was that it's really the start line. It's, Kalapala, as an exciting a platform as it is not enough. And we learned about why art festivals are important, why gallerists are important, why research and publication about artists is important, what role it plays in our curriculum, in our schools and our universities, and art camps, collaboration between artists, and finally, this all-important role of an institution such as the museum. And now the foundation has several initiatives that intervene at each of these stages. But my most recent learnings, personal learnings about art, have really been about how important art is about telling stories, about showcasing our history and our present, and having almost subliminal conversations about topics which are very difficult to have vocally, and why those things are very important for a robust society. And as a corporate, we need a robust, healthy society around us to succeed as a corporate. And that is the underlying reason we have the corporate patronage around us. But again, more recently, my involvement in the museum and the Lunaganga Trust and the Jeffrey Bauer Trust has showed me that John Keel's group's involvement in the art is not just about support, whether it's governance or financial through the foundation, but also about the heritage that it has almost unconsciously become custodian of through its history. I mean, Ajit spoke about some of the art, but we have some incredible pieces that the various companies in the group have acquired over the years. And we host the George Keel collection as well. As a backdrop to this, what I have is a realization that Sri Lankan art is on par with art around the world, certainly art from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and South Asian region, but possibly around the world in terms of the stories that it tells, in terms of its quality, in terms of our artists. But we do not, unfortunately, have a forum or an institution which safeguards, preserves, researches, or showcases this. And that's why we've started to support the museum through the foundation. But it's also brought home the legacy of John Keels as custodian of these pieces. I've been very fortunate at the Lunaganga Trust and the Jeffrey Bauer Trust, and they have museum professionals with them. And they have showcased to me how a private collection can be researched, documented, and really showcased to international fame. So for JKH, with its custodian of, with its collection of art, and that's, you know, a wide variety of art, there's an opportunity, but there's also a duty, because we are custodians of national treasures here. And they need to be seen and appreciated by the Sri Lankan public. So a slightly different tilt to patronage, the duty to showcase what you have.
I think that's incredibly important. These are the points that you're sharing, not only about how the patronage that we speak about, there are so many crossovers. And when we speak about the arts community, there are naturally going to be other areas that become involved in preserving our heritage and how you engage as particularly a corporate in patronage. But I think it's very difficult to restrict this to any industry entirely, and I'm sure the other panelists are going to expand on this during the conversation. So I'm looking forward to hearing others' opinions as well on this. I'm going to go over now to Shant Fernando. Shant Fernando, you are the chairman of Paradise for a Group of Companies, a collector of art and antiques, and individual who has made art and design a part of the DNA of your group of companies, and more recently established the Shant Fernando Foundation. Can you speak to us a little bit about your passion for art and design and where it all began, and how your journey towards becoming a platform, starting a platform for the Sri Lankan art industry evolved?
It started all from my childhood. To be very honest with you, at an early stage, my mother recognized my talent and gave me a lot of support and encouraged me right through my school career to win an art prize every year at St. Thomas's. From there on, my interest in art and design was fostered by my family. And then at the age of 20, I can remember going and buying my first original painting from Barbara Sanzoni's house in Anderson Road. And I treasure that painting in 1970. And thereafter, I went off to Australia. I went to Australia, first to New Zealand, the Netherlands, and then on to Australia. But I was so interested in art that I visited many a gallery and educated myself. From there on, when I lived in Australia, primarily my taste in art I was very patriotic. It had to be Sri Lankan or from the region. So in as much as I knew all the artists in Australia, I could afford to only buy a Donald Friend painting at an art sale. And that was a kickoff. And when I was there, I came to Sri Lanka and I tried to do some research on who the artists were to collect. And my cousin put me onto Tilak Samaravikrama, and that was the only painting I took with me back to Australia. Then, did I speak of the Lucky Senanayaka? I did. Lucky Senanayaka's painting that I bought at house of Barbara Sanzoni. And then from there on, I decided to return to Sri Lanka, and I started researching what was available in Sri Lanka. And there was a gallery called the Heritage Gallery on Dharmapala Marg. And there I got acquainted with the likes of Jagat Veerasinghe, Thenwara, Jagat Ravindra, Kingsley Gunathilaka, and Anamli Pereira. Thereafter, I sort of developed friendships with these people, and I used to go to their homes and buy paintings. I can remember Jagat lived in a room somewhere in Kohol. I used to go and buy paintings from him. Then we had Thenwara, and I have some very early paintings from these two artists who are today very recognized. And I was fortunate enough, my most favorite building in my life was Jeffrey Barber's office, because I used to live behind it in Geetanjali Place. And I used to visit and fantasize living in this house. And I was fortunate enough that Jeffrey Barber used to visit my home, and he knew me. He used to come almost once a month and have a meal with us. And we had a very good acquaintanceship. And I approached him one day and asked him whether he would rent his office to me. And he thought for a moment and he said, why not? And he said somebody was coming to see it. And the next day, and whether I could come there. And I went there, and the person who wanted to rent it didn't turn up. So we started negotiating, and he asked me what I wanted to do. He laughed and said something, well, not another Paradise Lost. But anyway, he asked me what I was going to do, and I said to turn it into a gallery and a cafe. Today, it's a cafe with a gallery. And that became the platform for many an artist in Sri Lanka. They say it themselves. I had to search for artists. The first exhibition I had was of Saskia Penteron, thereafter Jagat Veerasinghe, Then we had, I couldn't find artists. You see, the problem is that in Sri Lanka, artists were not ready to keep showing. And I had a collection of Lionel Weds, and I had a very, very, very provoking exhibition of Lionel Weds. And today, you know, I must say, there were collectors who came from overseas and invested in a lot of these photographs, because of which today they're in the Tate, as well as there's an exhibition going to MoMA of Lionel Weds. Now, thereafter, I can remember looking for artists and going to the Kalapola and discovering an artist called Sanjeeva Kumara. He had a painting there. So I followed him. I went to his home. And actually, I had to support him financially to have that exhibition, which I did. And it was the most successful exhibition I ever had. Every painting was sold. And there was one in storage that I had rejected. And even that was called for. And this boy, I take this as a victory, because it was from there that he got himself sponsorship and a scholarship to go to the Netherlands and do his master's. Like that, there are many success stories that we were able to have from the Paradise Road galleries. And that is something that I keep fostering. You see, I think Ajit Guruvardhan, since he mentioned my name, I'm going to talk about him. He's one of my biggest.
I'm gonna cut you off because I want you to continue in the second question and not share too much with us from the next. But I think something that you spoke about there is incredibly important and relevant to our next panelist. Not only how the gallery plays an important role as a platform, but also how the relationships you form with the artists that you collect are a very, very important part of patronage. And Anuji, this brings me to you, a collector and patron, and a more recently social entrepreneur. Anuji, you have supported projects, support projects, including Colombo Scope and the 8th Set of Conflict, published by Raking Leaves. Many of the projects that you have been involved with are not ones we can list down on paper, because they are based on relationships with artists and supporting the industry via the galleries, and very much galleries and people who play important roles in an art industry, but very much from behind the scenes. And as an individual patron, you are an incredibly important part of our local art industry. Anuji, can you tell us a little bit more about how this evolved over the last 11 years since you began collecting art, but how did this transform into the role that you play today as a patron?
Thank you for inviting me. I thought rather than kind of go through my whole journey, as it were, I'd really focus on some key things that happened right at the beginning almost, which I think might encourage other people to think about stepping up to patronage and doing that independently also, how that could work. So I want to start by saying that I don't have any business interest or any professional interest to advance. I've just had an interest in art. And right from the outset, for me, collecting has gone hand in hand with, as Saskia said, forming relationships with people who were not just artists, but people in the art world. And that was really for me to get a better understanding about the artist, his or her work, their trajectories, how it is they were really engaging, I suppose, with local issues and with their circumstances around them. So for me, this kind of experience you could say it still felt very much like spectating or being sort of a passive observer, getting information and knowledge for myself. And there was a moment in which I made a shift, and that I think is quite an important thing. And it sort of happened quite by accident, and a few things sort of converged. I think the first thing was that I joined as a volunteer an art committee, which is really about advancing community engagement for St. Paul's School in London. And I organize an art lecture series. And that was for students aged from age 7 to 18, and a wider kind of network of schools, and an audience of about 10,000 that we reach out to. And it's really to raise awareness about how art is an important part of everyday life. Art is more than just the artist or the work, and that there's a world beyond that. And that helped me to move beyond my immediate relationships with the artists I knew or the gallerists I knew. And almost simultaneously, I was invited by the Tate to join their South Asian Acquisitions Committee. And I had many conversations over a long period of time, at least a couple of years, where I was trying to understand whether that would be the best way for me to support contemporary art in Sri Lanka. And they were very gracious, and I don't want to seem disrespectful in any way, but around 2014, when I was invited, they were firmly focused on the group 43. And I knew that I wanted to be engaged with the contemporary art scene. I wanted to be part of the art world that was my lifetime, and exploring the world that was around me. But these two things simultaneously helped me to kind of know what it is I really wanted to focus on. And straight away, when Tenuara introduced me to Sharmini Pereira and her outstanding Raking Leaves artist book, The HSZ of Conflict, I knew immediately the kind of projects that I wanted to work with. And I also knew that I could have impact. And the book project involves 10 contemporary artists. They're based locally. They're also part of the diaspora. And one of Sharmini's goals was to place the book in major art institutions. And so it felt to me that this was the way to begin and to continue to advance contemporary art.
I think what's very interesting in the role that you play as patron is exactly as you pointed out, that it's also important about focusing and being very clear on what you want to be involved in. And that doesn't necessarily occur immediately for potentially younger patrons or new patrons, people who decide they're interested in becoming a patron, supporting the scene in a different way at a later stage. But really having that focus and being sure of how you engage and what you engage and what you expect of a project when you do. And that brings me back to you, Ajit, to talk a little bit more with us about the museum project, and if you can share with us what's happening at the moment, how it's structured, and for you as the founding committee member, your plans for the museum and creating a sustainable structure for the project, but also for those watching who might be interested in supporting the institution, perhaps sharing some information with us on that, and just the experience overall, if you can tell us a little bit about it. You just have to go off mute.
Sorry. The first thing is that because I hadn't spoken much about the logic behind the museum, let me just sort of try to put this in a nutshell. You know, the importance of the museum as what would be a institution, a cultural institution for Colombo and then Sri Lanka, is that cultural institutions provide the glue that binds communities together, and culture does attract people to a place. Just as much as schools and housing and transportation creates an environment in which this too will create an environment in which other industries, goods and services can grow. So that it is really important that we create a entity that is not just simply something that just displays a few pieces of art, which is a sort of static environment, but this becomes a very, very active institution, a cultural institution that pulls in the people. The museum has several sort of it's a non-profit organization. It's absolutely non-profit organization. And it's obviously has therefore to exist on patronage, and I will touch on that in a little bit. But as part of this museum, one of the part of the key aspects of this would be that it aims to uplift the creative industries. It aims to leverage our art graduates by directly providing them jobs, career opportunities, building capacity and skills in conservation, which is a huge issue here in this climate where we have so much humidity and the lack of sort of proper storage. Art is just vanishing. It's just being destroyed. So we need to create, there is a whole industry behind conservation, and that is so important for us to create. There are people here who will sort of begin the learnings of conservation, and then they drift overseas because there is no industry here. And all of this becomes an art economy. And then you link education in. Education is a key part of what a museum will play. And we believe the whole point is to integrate this with the school systems from a younger age, so that there is appreciation of what art is, and this will continue to develop all the work that has been done. Shant mentioned how we literally created the contemporary art scene, looking for artists. Now, we need to feed this a lot more, so that because there is so much talent here, they just have no outlet. They have no outlet that will recognize them. At least they have limited outlets. Let's put it that way. I can't say no outlet at all, but there's so much more that can be done, so that art can be much bigger than what it is. And that's really what a museum does in any country. So this is nothing new. I'm not trying to say we are trying to do anything major or anything new. And that is the whole concept of this, right? What have we done so far? We kicked this off a couple of years. The whole concept was kicked off just prior to my retirement at John Keys. Obviously, because it took a lot of sort of thinking, and these art, the people who are working in these areas, they sort of put this whole thing together. But we actually launched in 2019, and obviously the timing was straight. We went straight into the pandemic and so on. We were fortunate that we were given generously donated space for a period of a year by the Innovation Tower, Colombo Innovation Tower, where we had a floor. And we kicked this off with one exhibition called 100,000 Small Tales. This was curated by Shamini Pereira, and that ran for about 6 months. And in that 6 months, it was interesting. Before the lockdown and so on, in a period of about 3 months, we had over, I think, close to 4,000 people coming through this, including many from the schools, students, young children. There were programs that brought them in and worked together with them. Again, not a static sort of walk around sort of exhibition type of thing. There are various programs that were conducted within that in that space during that period. We are now, of course, we are now at this point in time with the team, it's a small team, working on training, research, and working on the next item that or exhibition or event that would be launched, and that is work in progress, and would be looking at moving into a space on a longer term basis in a more convenient location that is easily accessible for a start. I mean, these are all going to be temporary. I mean, the long term, and these are, when you say long term, this will be beyond my time and so on. This is 10, 15 years down the road, where we would look at the proper infrastructure coming into place to house what would be the permanent museum and all the ancillary verticals that go with it. Of course, to do all of this, the bottom line is you need money. There is nothing can be done without money, because there are professionals working in this in these institutions. You've got other expertise that has to be paid for, rent, electricity, all of this needs to be funded. So you have the structure of this would have to be through various sponsors. So there will be we would be looking at patrons at different levels. But to really make it work, of course, you need the large corporates and those who have art collections, who would be willing to, sometimes donate art or in various forms. You need interaction with government for various schemes that would give incentive, which would incentivize people to fund these institutions. But it will have to also get broad-based so that everybody participates in it. So you democratize patronage as well. You don't just it's not an exclusive club at all. It cannot be that. This is a museum for the country, for the nation, for the people, for the artists. So there are schemes of that nature will be put into place.
But I think that's incredibly important to patronage in general. It shouldn't be an exclusive club, and it doesn't have to be. You don't have to have heaps of cash to throw around. It's really about getting involved, and can very often it need not involve financial commitments at all. It's really about supporting and starting somewhere. So I think that's a really, really important point. That you mentioned the support earlier, Nadija, of the museum via the John Keels Foundation. And when we were having conversations leading up to this panel discussion, you spoke of how your understanding of patronage evolved also very recently in an experience where you were reading the diaries or the initial objective of the George Keat Foundation. And I found this really interesting, from the De Silvas. And what we know of the John Keels Foundation, and of course the collections across the leisure side of the business, of course, we're aware of. But can you take us through a little bit more about the John Keels Foundation, the plans for Cinema and Life, and how patronage specifically related to the arts community, but of course with inevitable intersections, is evolving at this moment?
Truthfully, the word patronage is something that I think we at John Keels became conscious of quite recently. As the John Keels Foundation is the CSR entity of the John Keels Group. The group itself is probably the largest conglomerate in the country and involved in practically every aspect of its economy. As a 150-year-old Sri Lankan corporate, we've long held the ethos that we, as a corporate citizen, need to play a role in making sure that our society and our environments around us flourish. The role of art, as I said, we inherited it because we had a partnership with the George Keith Foundation for over 30 years. And that started us down this road. But the role of art in developing a social consciousness, in having a robust, inclusive society, in talking about diversity and inclusivity is something that we as a foundation and as a group believe very, very strongly in. And we believe that art is a very unique mechanism to support this. And as I said, whilst Ajit was deputy chair, we had great leadership who set us down this road where we thought about the different interventions that were required to support arts. And I want to talk for a moment, like you said, about what Sita and Cedric did, and just acknowledge the pioneering work that they did through the George Keith Foundation. Their records from 40 years ago show that they had a vision for a contemporary art museum, for supporting artists through artist camps, research, exhibitions, through arts festivals. And today, the George Keith Foundation still is the only entity, I think, that does 2 public exhibitions, which are free to artists and takes no commissions for new artists and for old artists. So it still continues to play, but just to acknowledge the vision that the founders had, which encompass a lot of what the John Keels Foundation now supports. So over the years, we've supported arts festivals such as Columbuscope, publications on artists, showcasing Sri Lankan artists in exhibitions in London or at festivals such as Venice. And now, of course, institution building through the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art. And it's something that we're quite humbled and privileged to do because we recognize it's a national effort. And it's not something that we want to name, but we recognize that we need to play a role. Each of us in Sri Lanka need to play a role in supporting this sort of national effort, and we are lending every effort we can to it. I should also mention that the John Keels Foundation does support other arts initiatives such as the Vajra Sena Foundation, the Alivihara Trust, the Gratian Trust, all as essential cogs in our cultural wheel. But fine arts is something that we are very passionate about. I want to speak for a moment about Kalapala, if you don't mind, because it's where it started. And for a long time, it's where we thought it ended. And Kalapala, which we have partnered the George Keith Foundation in arranging for over 30 years, is an annual open-air, uncurated art fair for those who don't know it. It started off very small, but now it has about 350 artists from all corners of the island who prepare for over a year to bring their art for this one day. And on a physical event, we would have 35,000 visitors for that day. This year, for the first time, we went online, and we were really gratified to see how many of the artists had made overseas sales and shipped it overseas. So we've suddenly had a diaspora or apparently quite a lot of diplomatic interest in our Sri Lankan artists. And it's great to see this awareness that's happening. It's really great. And I think what we are trying to do with the museum, or with what the museum, we're trying to support the museum to do, is now build that into an institutional framework. This interest, this talent, this capacity and stories that we have to tell. You asked me to talk a little bit about the other role of John Keels as a patron, and that is with its collection. Ajit spoke about how we've been incorporating art into our hotels. And as I said, the group finds itself rather inadvertent custodian of some of the greatest modern art treasures, I think, in Sri Lanka. It's not just the paintings and sculpture, but also architectural buildings. We own the Bentara Beach Hotel, which is studied in universities around the world as the first example of modern tropical modernism. Sorry. We have the Cinema Lakeside, one of the first hotels which had a Sri Lankan architect. The McKinnon's building, it's the colonial kind of herald to the entrance to the port. We have Cinnamon Lodge, inspired by an ancient monastery at Ritikala with some incredible architecture around it. Cinnamon Bay Hotel, designed with the very unique heritage of that area. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about our newest venture, Cinnamon Life, because the group's history of incorporating the artists into our buildings has culminated in this new venture. So Cinnamon Life is a building which has been designed by a Sri Lankan born at Trinity College educated artist, Cecil Belmont. And he tells me that his design was meant to challenge the cookie cutter tower shapes of Colombo, and that he has built something that melds his Eastern heritage with his mathematical and scientific training. So he claims that it's rather a strange looking building if you haven't seen it, but it's inspired by the shapes of the guard stones and moonstones of Polonnaruwa and the curves of the ancient stupas in our historical cities. Its balance comes from the energies of the cosmic dancer, Nataraja, with one leg extended and one arm thrown backwards for counterbalance. The colors reflecting the monsoon skies. Very poetic. And as this building now nears completion, we in the group want to fill it. We want to make it a vessel for Sri Lankan art. So we've started a program where we're starting to commission and purchase Sri Lankan art for its public spaces. And we're trying to make sure that the rooms have works that are produced in Sri Lanka. And within that building, in acknowledgement of our duty to show some of our corporate collection, we're trying to find space to host a collection that will be available to the public. And I think it's our duty, but it's also a huge opportunity because Sri Lanka hasn't seen some of these before, and nor has any
It's incredibly important, Nadija, as well, because what we've seen in a lot of hotel projects prior to this is, works that have not necessarily been, we see a lot of artworks, of course, is in such a huge project as this, that should be commissioned for a space, but not necessarily acknowledging that via the contemporary art scene. And I think that what you're speaking of via Cinnamon Life and the multitude of projects aligned with the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art and all the other gaps which are being filled in this art ecosystem that we have locally, as you rightly said, us only showing the strength of this art industry, which has always existed, but was hugely underrepresented. And I'm going to move over to you, Shant, now to speak a little bit more, not only as a gallerist, but maybe if you can speak from your experiences and tell us a little bit more about an overview and the challenges that you see as a patron of the Sri Lankan art industry, and how, if you can touch on as well, how on your recently established nonprofit plans to get involved in this from a patronage perspective. If you can take us through that, you'll have to unmute.
Okay, the opportunity that I got, as I said, in Sri Lanka to promote art was when I got the space of Jeffrey Barber and I opened Paradise Road Galleries. And the experiences that I've had in getting art for exhibition has been very difficult, because you see the artists that we have, I would say 95% of the artists that we have in Sri Lanka are not privileged. When they want to put an exhibition together, very often I've had to help them financially because they haven't got the money, nor the resources, nor the space to paint in. And these are the difficulties that we have. Now, with these artists, I have supported them. I've tried to support them in various ways. I mean, I call my friends, including one of the panelists, and I say there's good art over there, and we go and purchase art when we see it. Now, I'll tell you a story once when I was driving past the Lal Event Gallery, and I noticed an exhibition coming up there, and it was of Jagat Ravindra. So I walked in, and I normally like to go before the preview, and I looked around, and I checked out a painting, and I said, that's for me. And as I was leaving, I felt, oh, it might be a bad omen not to pay for it. So I paid for it, and I'm going to wait. And 4 days later, I went back to the gallery, and I said, Jagat, was the exhibition successful? He said, no, sir. It's only the painting that you bought that was sold. I said, my walls in the gallery are hungry for paintings. I can't find an artist to show. And I took all his paintings, and I'll tell you, I sold 90% of that collection. So these are the problems that we have, you know, that they, unfortunately, the Lal Event became a one-way street, and people don't go past. And by having the Paradise Road galleries, I supported a lot of artists, and my collection grew. You know, all these artists were people who had never exhibited before. I sort of get them in, and I check their paintings out and see whether they're suitable for the gallery. And then I start collecting them. And then I ended up with a huge collection of my own. Now, my dream was to build a house of my dreams after my children were educated. And then I built this home, and in it, I was privileged to have a 4,000 square foot art gallery. You know, when you collect art, as we all know, you can't live with them all. So you have the select few that become your world. And I have this gallery where I have a representation of every single 43 group artist, the established artists, the established modern artists, and the contemporary art. So all this is on 3 floors, which is, for me, an accomplishment in life. And I hope to organize tours for artists to get, because there are very few places that one can go and see private collections. And we had, I mean, this gallery that I have hosted, I mean, I had a dinner for the director of MoMA, Glenn Lowry. He came and had a look at Sri Lankan art and how it was developing. And I took pride in that, you know, having someone like that coming in. And now my children have decided that I should have a foundation to support these artists. I mean, I've been supporting artists for the last 23 years or more. And we recently made a donation to an American museum, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, LACMA, which is in the west, on the west coast of America.
Los Angeles.
Yeah, Los Angeles. Sorry?
In Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles. And we've donated 6 paintings, 4 paperworks from Jagat Vijayasinghe and 2 canvas works from Chandragupta Tenwar. I mean, it is wonderful. You see, today, living artists from Sri Lanka haven't got exposure. And it is wonderful to get, as you would know, exposure for these people. And thereby, you know, there'll be more ambition with the artists to create better. one of the biggest problems we have in Sri Lanka, what I feel, and that where we need a lot of support also from your museum, is to make sure that paintings are authentic. There are so many paintings out there that are fakes, and people are exploiting George Keats, Ivan Peiris. I walk into houses and I'm flabbergasted when I look at the paintings and they say they're originals. Nobody is interested in finding out the provenance of a painting. I mean, I can remember my daughter bringing in some people from Sotheby's or Christie's who gave us a talk on art and told us the importance of working out the history of paintings we have, the provenance. And that is a huge problem here. You can walk into houses and see copies of paintings that I own as well, that are being sold and for big money, because it has become a status symbol in Sri Lanka, right? To have a George Keats on the wall.
This is an incredibly important subject that I think actually deserves its own panel conversation. But I'm so glad that it was raised in this talk and that it is really the beginning of a discussion, because I think it's incredibly important and a responsibility of our patrons to take on this massive issue and deal with it. And in the interest of time, I'm going to move over to you, Anuji.
And I've got to say a quick thing.
Yes.
I actually approached the George Keats Foundation and I said, we'll all get together and start registering the paintings with provenance of every George Keats painting there is. He is the most famous artist of Sri Lanka.
He's putting the pressure on Nabija, so we'll pick up. You've given us a good topic for the next panel, but I'm going to move on to Anuji now. But truly, truly an incredibly important subject that needs to be discussed. Anuji, we spoke about your involvement in projects and your work as a patron. What I'd really like to understand, and what I've come to understand, is also that your understanding of patronage has really evolved in recent times, and how you're working at the moment seems to be an incredibly interesting cross-section between industries, and art has taken you into a less expected world. Can you tell us a little bit about the projects you're working on at this moment?
Okay, well, that's put me on the spot a little bit. I am currently involved in, I suppose, two things. Saskia, before I answer your question, I want to just kind of say that everybody has raised so many interesting and important issues. I think that regardless of the position that we have as patrons, we're all somehow dealing with this in our own ways, I think. And for me, tying into what you're trying to get me to talk about, one thing that's been important is that patronage as an individual hasn't really been just about money. It's been about engagement, and it's been about finding ways in which to support artists and advance really the way in which the world around us thinks about art as well. So the project, and I think if I just touch on what are the ways that you can give briefly, I think, you know, you can give space, you can also give time. There are resources that can go towards publication, then there, or to production, or to artist residencies, or to travel, or to research. You know, all of these have been mentioned, and I think they're not something that's so far from what we necessarily do in life. I think, you know, there's a perception that art is somehow out there and for some small group of people to consume. And I want to shift away to art is part of our everyday lives. It affects all of us. And the project that I'm presently involved with is one that in fact involves public health. And it's looking at ways in which art can activate. I should say I'm an architect, I'm an urban designer and a development planner. And that experience has helped me kind of join up some dots and see ways in which art can be used to transform the public realm around us, create new opportunities for artists, as well as others to innovate and to create in the arena of public health. So it's a museum project that I'm busy with in London, but its focus is the dementia community. And we're looking at ways in which we know that art has a very important intersection with health and well-being. So it's not just looking at art as an investment. It's not looking at art as part of our economy or our creative economy in terms of jobs and in terms of income, but in terms of kind of benefits that the society as a whole can really take advantage of. And also, I think this project is very much about creating new partnerships, new kinds of partnerships, and new ways about thinking about art. So that art isn't limited to paintings and sculpture and drawing, but it's about engaging and trying to understand that artists today work with the environment, they work with technology, they work with social issues, they work with development issues, they work with urbanism, they work with urban transformation. You know, there's any way in which you might want to bring a personal, professional background or an interest into conversation with art. And I think that's really how I have also kind of progressed in my own journey, was to join up dots. And one of the ways in which I engaged with Kaleidoscope was through the way in which their festival is organized in kind of landmark buildings that are often derelict and neglected in Colombo. And for me, it was a way in which you start to open up new conversations about the fabric of the city, our history, communities that have been disrupted by transformations. And that was sort of what got me interested in Kaleidoscope. But more importantly, now that I've sponsored it, I've been seeing behind the scenes how it is they provide mentoring and opportunities for residencies and collaboration for not just Sri Lankan artists, but artists within the region and other international artists to engage.
While I have you on this topic, I'm actually going to bring in our first question from Lars Waldorf, who I believe has something to ask from you, Anuji. So I'm just going to bring him into the conversation on video so that we can get as close to an in-person panel as possible. So he's just going to, is he still with us, or is technology giving us a bit of a challenge? No, it seems we lost him. He'll join us. Oh, there you are, Lars. Hi, Lars. You're on mute, so you need to.
Yeah, thanks very much, Anoji. I found your comments about making art in the everyday very resonant, and so I was interested in kind of the work you've done both with the Raking Leaves project with Kaleidoscope. How do you widen the audiences for contemporary art in Sri Lanka, particularly when so much of that art is very political?
Well, I would start by saying it isn't only political. So that's important to first be open-minded about what it is. I think so much of the work that contemporary artists have produced can really be read on multiple levels and engaged with on multiple levels. I personally think that art is kind of a mirror to life, and I think it's a real challenge for everybody not to shift their gaze away from sometimes very difficult things to look at. I like to think of art as a kind of activator where if we don't like what we are seeing, maybe we should be compelled to do something about it. So I think, you know, that's really what I think is important about art, that we engage with it and that we find a way to sort of do something that is within our own capacities, whatever that may be, to acknowledge that and then to somehow, I don't know, use art as a way to inspire us to make change happen and to live better, full stop.
Thank you, Lars, for joining us to ask a question. Lars,
Thanks. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Of Sri Lankan contemporary artists. So it's really wonderful to have you join us even briefly for this conversation. I'm going to just bring in another question in. We have with us Suresh Dominique. Suresh, you have to unmute, Suresh. Can we see you? You can turn your video on to ask your question. We can't see you and you'll have to unmute.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can't see you, but we can hear you. That's fine. You can go ahead and ask the question.
Okay, my question is to Nadija. Nadija, other than John Keels and one or two banks, I don't see any other organization, private or public, supporting the art scene. What can be done to ensure that we can get them participating?
That's true. At least in public, I don't see a lot of corporate support. But what we became aware of as the museum was taking off was that a lot of corporates are, like John Keels is, custodian of some great pieces of work. Aitken Spence is one, the Forbes Group, the Carson's Group, and there are lots of companies that have. I see SoftLogic now, supporting a lot of artists. And what we're hoping to do, and Ajit, I think, mentioned it in his talk, is to allow these corporates to support the arts in their own way by becoming corporate patrons through the museum. And they can decide how they want to and at what level they want to support it. But like I said, it's a national endeavor, and it's a national endeavor that will benefit everyone in this country. And it's a real effort to be inclusive through the museum. The foundation, the John Keels Foundation, recognized the importance of it, and we are providing some core funding, but we are by no means putting a monopoly on branding, or we don't need that. We want other corporates and really other individuals, and even at whatever level, just to join in a national effort.
Thank you, Suresh, for joining us. I'm going to bring in, we spoke about SoftLogic's support of artists more recently, and we have Nilujaya Tilaka here, who is also wanting to ask a question, so I'm just bringing her in. Hi, Nilu.
Hi. So I have a question to Ajit. You talked about in your talk here about how art should be affordable and it should not be an exclusive club that collects art. But how do you see as a patron, what initiatives would you take to elevate the underprivileged artists to achieve their dreams in like the museum that you're creating, like the local Guggenheim museum that was created by the patrons in the global art scene. What would you do? What initiatives would you take for these artists to come out?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk about things that I don't know about, right? And I'm not an expert in all of this. I mean, you heard Shant saying what he did in the earlier days to bring up the artists and so on. So here there would be, as I said, from what I know, from what I hear when we sit and when the teams, experts sit and discuss the ways forward, this becomes a location, and that's what I mentioned. It becomes a destination for exchanging of ideas, for a continuous exchanging of ideas. You know, because existing artists, the younger artists, the up and coming artists, who have no outlet, who have no way of generating revenue, sometimes they need to learn by talking, by interacting. They improve what they've got. Then they move into the galleries, which is now we've got, you know, which works well. They can monetize their capability. But to get there, they need a lot more interaction and education and so on. So that is one key part that will be done by the museum. There will be a lot of research, a lot of for artists to go and research, for artists to understand what's going on. You know, at times it is exposure, right? I mean, all of us have learned what we've done, what we have, our knowledge has come out of exposure, right? It's not something that we were born with, or not necessarily something we studied at a particular time. It is continuous learning. And that is one thing that a museum would do. You know, it becomes part of that cultural fabric of the country. And from students who are, I mean, today you have students in school who are probably young students who are probably excellent artists, but just on the way, they just sort of move off and go into whatever else they need to do to earn a living. You know? So here, hopefully they will continue. They won't lose their talent for art, even if they do another vocation. At least this will enable that dialogue to continue, and you know, you create this whole ecosystem. Hopefully, I mean, that's the way I would see this institution working, and that's why it will need continuous support. It's not these are not one-off situations. So it's an issue of the institution in itself has to operate in a manner that shows value, that will generate the continuous support. It's not like these are not patronage in this instance is not one-off donations and then you say thank you very much. It's not that. You know, there has to be, you know, in a way it's an ROI, right? In a way, but it's a different type of ROI. But we've got to take it to that level, and it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen overnight. These are things that have to build up over time, build capacity, capability, and so on. So you don't do this on a big bang approach. You do it in incremental steps so that you can grow the institution in a sustainable manner.
Thank you, Nilu, for coming on, and thank you, Ajit, for answering that question. I'm going to take us to our last question in the interest of time. Asita Pinnadur from Nations Trust Private Banking, that has been the supporter of this talk series, is coming on to ask a question. Let's just bring him in. Asita, you will need to unmute, yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Saskia. Thank you for the opportunity. Actually, my question, I would like to address this to Mr. Udeshan Fernando. So I think in my view, I think you made a very valid point. Yes, I mean, there are lots of, fakes out there in the market. I think, so one way of, tackling this would be, in my view, I think so. If you look at, yes, we have the museums, and we have a couple of corporates who are back in the space, and also one area that we could feel is to form an association of professional art collectors. I think that's the one vacuum that I see in the ecosystem, which will help to grow the market further. Yes, we have, as Mr. Gunawardana correctly said, we have few players in the market, but such professional body will help the market to grow further, and the industry to expand further, and also it will help to disseminate knowledge and expertise among the newcomers, which will be joining to the industry, as well as collectors. Maybe it will be an artist as well. So by doing that, that will also help the new joiners, or even some of the seasoned ones to understand what is fake, what is not fake, or the authentic ones. So I'd like pick your brain on this topic.
Can you just repeat the question, Asita, just to the first question that you asked, just for clarity?
Yeah, so question is, what I recommended was, isn't it better to have a professional association for all the art collectors, so that it will help to share knowledge, share expertise, and that will help to tackle the fake arts in the market, because then the people are.
Can you share your thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Right. In my opinion, you see, the most famous artist, as I said, was George Keat, and there's the George Keat Foundation, right, which exists, that is promoting art, having exhibitions, young artists, and whatever. They are the people who should start off by establishing a register, right, for all the George Keat originals that are in Sri Lanka. It is a big job. I was willing to help as well. I actually spoke to, what's his name, the president.
Mike Anthony.
With Mike Anthony. And we have to be a bit more vibrant and start working. When we have an idea, take it forward. We can't just keep it and procrastinate. And that's a huge problem in Sri Lanka. Nobody gets on with it. And we have to push and establish that. And from there on, we can take all the other artists. And that way, we can preserve our art for posterity. The amount of fakes, it's unbelievable. I mean, Ajit, I'm sure you've seen them as well, that we have to put a stop to this. If we do, we're ruining the art of Sri Lanka. Right? We can't allow it. And where do we start? I mean, we can have support from the bank now, and then we'll have John Keel supporting. I'll support as well. But we should have a panel. I mean, as long as Albert Dharmasiri is there, he can identify a lot of the work. I mean, he just produced a book on George Keat. So we have to use these people, or else it'll all die. And it'll disappear. And we'll have a land full of fakes. Doesn't everybody who's an art collector want to own a George Keat? I mean, he was not my favorite artist, but I do have a big representation of his work in my collection. So, it is very, very important that we get together and get a body together to preserve this. What do you feel?
Thank you, Asita, for asking the question. As I mentioned earlier, I think this is a topic that really should be taken further. And as you said, Sham Fernando, not only the George Keat Foundation, but the various representative trusts and so on. I mean, I think it is quite a large initiative that's going to take a lot of involvement, given the size of the issue that we have. But I'm so glad that it came up in this conversation. And I guess to wrap up today's panel, I would like to say a massive thank you to all of you for so graciously agreeing to be a part of this panel. And open your stories. I know everybody wasn't too keen on talking about their projects, but I think that's why I really wanted to push everybody to sit here and have this conversation and open up about it. And that came up in this conversation, the idea of sharing, as well as collaboration and talking not only about what we have achieved, but discussing the challenges, supporting each other and collaborating, understanding the initiatives that are happening. And I think that's the way forward for the development of our local art industry is collaboration, and is something that can strengthen us immensely. So thank you again to the panelists for being a part of this. Thank you to Nations Trust Private Banking for supporting this initiative. We will be having more talk series, as I mentioned. This will be recorded and shared with everyone who registered and on our channel online. So thank you, everyone. Stay safe and stay well, and see you soon.
Nations Trust Bank Private Banking is the epitome of elite banking. With its exclusive privileges devoted to providing just the right balance between financial success and lifestyle, our private banking members richly deserve. A financial solution dedicated to excellence, with an unparalleled array of products and services that enrich, enhance, and empower success. A financial solution focused on wealth creation, lifestyle, and the establishment of legacy. A legacy of priority, a legacy of abundance, a legacy much desired. Creating a legacy that's timeless.